You're listening to the People Agenda podcast, brought to you by leading HR, workforce and payroll transformation specialist, Lace Partners. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and welcome to the latest People Agenda podcast. It's me, Chris Howard from Lace Partners. Thank you, as always, for joining us. And today we are going to be talking about a new campaign that we are kicking off in back end of 2025, but all of the good juicy stuff you're going to learn about in 2026 as we kick off the new year. It is our new campaign called Rewired HR, the new ecosystem. And I have got two splendid lacers, one of which is on client site today, trying to weave in and out of painting that's happening. But the less said about that, the better. Alice, how are you doing? You all right?
I'm very well, Chris. How are you?
I'm all right. I'm not too bad. You excited to get into the Rewired HR new ecosystem?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm keen to talk about this topic. It's one of my faves.
Yeah, and I know it's something that you guys and our second guest, if you like, although we're not really all guests, we're all friends here from Lace Partners. It's our exec director of our HR transformation practice, Kat Bernardes. How you doing, Kat? You all right?
Yes, very well, thanks, Chris.
Now, Kat, you came to me probably about 3-4 months ago and said, we've been talking about something in the HR transformation practice, and we think it's quite exciting. And that's what we're going to talk about today. I've already given the campaign name away, but what we want to do is talk a little bit around why we have decided to run this campaign, why it's important that chief people officers, HR teams are focusing on this, what the component parts are, and some of the things that we'll be doing in 2026, just really to help amplify the need for a new HR ecosystem. So I'm going to kick you off with that. But before I do that, you are both familiar with our tradition on this podcast, and that is a fundamentally different question. If you are somebody that has never listened to this podcast before, and this is the first time you're listening to it, I get to make my guests completely embarrassed by picking a totally random question that they have to answer, not related to HR. Kat, today's question, I'm going to start with you, then I'm going to go to Alice, and then I'll give you mine, is that I've just read an article about a Baltimore cyclist who's just completed, I think it's over 1,000 different pieces of hubcaps he's collected over his many years, and he's created an art installation in his front garden. And it got me thinking, what everyday item, or what item would you pick if you could collect hundreds or thousands of them, and you don't have to turn them into art installations, but somebody else does? What would you go for?
Oh, I think my answer probably says a lot about me. I would say gin bottles. My husband and I love to try different gins, and I especially like it when the bottle itself is very pleasing to the eye. Yeah, it'd be great. Other than what I do, which is stick fairy lights in them, it'd be delightful to have someone turn them into something a little bit more interesting and impactful. You know, my gin bottles.
Do you know what? I've got this image now of your whole house just being entirely illuminated by gin bottles. I quite like it.
It's Christmas time, so you know.
Yeah, exactly. And you get all of the different kind of colours and all of that sort of thing. Although most of the gin bottles that I have are clear, that probably would be less interesting. But Alice, what about you?
So I am a paddle enthusiast, like most of Britain at the moment. So I would actually collect paddles themselves, and create some kind of shrine in my house about how much I love paddle.
A shrine, hundreds of individual paddles to make one big mega paddle.
Yes, that would be mine.
That would be quite cool. I can see you cringing and you're like, oh, I've chosen a terrible choice, but I love it. That's brilliant. I love that. See, I'm an Arsenal obsessive. Anybody that's a regular listener to the podcast will know that, because I layer in quite a few of my answers to this related to football. So I would get somebody to take all of my old football kits that I just don't wear anymore and make something interesting from it. Not something boring like a quilt, something just interesting. I don't know where I got quilt from, but we should probably move away from that and onto our new campaign. Kat, talk to me a little bit around that conversation that we had about 3-4 months ago at the time of recording, and okay, Chris, this is why I think we need to do this. And after you and I chatted for about 25 minutes, I said, this is brilliant. We should turn this into our next campaign. And I think your response was like, I know. So talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I think it all stemmed from a session we had as a HRT team in the summer. We also had some of our colleagues from other parts of the business where we're exploring things around the topics of AI and workforce transformation. And we had a really great day talking about what is the future of HR and what are some of the things going on in the external market to really shake things up. And I think a lot of the discussion we had was around the ongoing level of unprecedented change that organisations are facing. There's political, economical change happening all over the place. We don't seem to be in any form of let up at any stage around what's going on. And it's meaning that businesses are transforming at a massive pace. And then what does that mean for HR? We know there have been challenges with some of the ways that HR operate today, and we foresaw that probably isn't going to change drastically unless we take a step back and fundamentally rewire the whole way that HR works. So that was where it all stemmed from. And it's been a really exciting journey since. Spent lots of time with the team. We've stormed and thought a lot about what it could look like. We've looked at what other people are talking about. But I think we've come up with something that is hopefully pushes boundaries and helps people think a bit differently.
Love it. Alice, any build?
Yeah, just to add to what Kat said, and from my perspective, where I work with clients on operating model and org design projects, we're really seeing a need for something different, particularly where the traditional ORIC starts to fall a bit short, mainly because it's not built to deal with the amount of change that Kat alluded to. It's built for stability, it's created for structure and efficiency, it's suited for very predictable, stable environments. And that's not the world we live in today. So we need to be able to design a model that is built for now and for the future and be able to deal with the level of change that's happening. And we see it time and time again with clients, the standard model of business partners, shared services, COEs, they really struggle to flex and be agile, particularly as business priorities shift, and they are shifting very quickly in front of our eyes. So we really need to be able to adapt the HR model to be able to suit business needs.
Yeah, I really love that. Actually, I'd like to get both of your opinions on this because I also remember having the conversation with you, Kat, again, back in the summer. And I think because of the drive and desire to embed AI as a concept, as a way of working, I think there's an element of danger of just thinking that a lot of this change is being driven just by AI. I think we might even start segueing into the model itself. But can I get a view of your thoughts around the dangers of just thinking this is just because AI is speeding up the pace of change of everything?
Look, AI is definitely a big driver for why we need to think differently. It's impacting work as a whole and what that means. So we can't say that it isn't a critical enabler here and a critical consideration. But I think that regardless of whether AI was a thing or not, that agility that Alice just talked about is missing massively from HR functions. We constantly have challenges talking to clients about how do I balance BAU with the change and transformation and business agenda that we're also trying to support? How do I get the investment and the funding in order to do everything really well? And we've got changing expectations from employees as well. They expect a lot more from the place that they come to work. There's a lot more focus on purpose and values, and that I get something from where I spend 80% of my time. And all of those things are just as, if not more, critical and impactful than the AI agenda as well.
Yeah. Alice?
Yeah, I think AI is a big part of the model and what we're seeing, but also for me, it's being able to deliver meaningful work for the business. That could be AI powered, but it's around how do you build a model that has the ability to be agile and flex as priorities change. And AI is one of them, but there are many others that are impacting the business that we're seeing.
And so let's get into the actual model piece itself, because what we'll do is we'll talk a little bit around each of the different sections. If you like, I can get you guys just to talk around what this section is. And then maybe just as we wrap up today's pod, just give a little tidbit as to how we're going to tell people about some of this stuff, like the vehicles and the mechanisms that we've got and things like that. I'll tell you what, let's do a bit of an overview, a top line bit of the model, and then we'll do the drill down. Kat, do you want to kick us off with just what that kind of looks like and a bit of an overview?
Yeah, I think the best way to bring it to life is probably to talk about the shifts, where we are today and where we think we need to get to with the new model. because those are fundamentally the principles that we started talking about when we discussed this initially. So the first is really driving business outcomes and being business outcome focused. So start shifting mindset for the function to what is it that we're trying to deliver to the business? What value are we trying to deliver? And how do we manage that end to end as an overarching experience? So it really puts ownership firmly across that kind of end to end of the model, as opposed to in the silos that we're traditionally set up and working in today. It's also about shifting to leveraging AI in a world where you can have an always on global service delivery model. There will be no need in the future to have we can be location agnostic. We can work and deliver services anywhere. And actually, a lot of them you'll be able to self-resolve yourself. So as an employee, I can get the things I need 90% of the time by executing and communicating with an agent myself. And that really changes what it means for things like shared services in the future. And we can get into that at another time. That's a far deeper conversation. But I think, there really is if I was looking at implementing shared services or GBS right now, I would want to take a step back and pause and just think about what that means for the future. The other couple of things to call out around being more data and insights led and more commercially focused. So again, this shift from purely focusing on service excellence and delivery to that commercial mindset that puts HR at the front of making and informing decisions that the business makes about people in a far more proactive way, using data, insights, intelligence at our fingertips to be able to inform the direction of travel and almost action things before they even become a risk or a problem when it comes to making sure that we've got the right talent in the right place at the right time, for example. Alice, what have I missed? I'm sure there's a couple of other things.
I think that for me, the biggest shift is just around the commerciality of the model as well. So where we typically have partnering capability, almost acting as the middleman between HR and the business, we're moving to a lot more of having commercial relationship partners. And we'll go into a bit more detail around what does actually a commercial business partner mean, but that will be very much a key focus in the model to be able to co-own business outcomes. So really driving true business value, not just tracking people KPIs or supporting people plans. They will be armed with the data and the insight to really focus on strategic workforce planning, for example.
So let's talk about those different sections, the layers then. Is there any kind of bits that you want to call out? If I'm a CPO listening in, the model has a few different layers to it, if you like. There's the customer interface. We talk about intelligence and insights. You've then got value delivery. We've got workforce transformation. We've got commercial relationship management. Some of this you guys have talked about and touched on as well, but I just don't know if there's any particular bits that you want to draw out. There's also people value orchestration as well. But can you just give me a bit of a thought around some of the key bits that as a CPO, if you're seeing this for the first time, you might want to think about? Kat, I'll start with you.
So I think the biggest change at the heart of this is what we're calling intelligence and insights. And this is really the biggest shift in terms of building capability that allows us to leverage intelligence. And by that, we mean agentic AI, automation, predictive analytics, as well as building insights with really good quality data that is not just single sourced from the people function, but actually business wide and maybe even external data as well to really make informed decisions. And also a really strong muscle in there to manage planning and prioritization, so that, as Alice talked about earlier, one of the biggest challenges is around that sort of like, where do we spend our time in the most effective way? This intelligence and insights engine really is the brain and the nervous system of HR in the future. And it's all about connecting the dots and making sure we're putting our time and energy in the right places. That in itself, if you get that, you get the data, you get the technology, you get the AI, and you get that prioritization capability right, delivers a seamless customer interface that allows you to deliver those always on services that people can self-resolve a huge proportion of their challenges. And it then really allows your value delivery teams to be focusing on where you're going to deliver value most to the business. It might be around building great teams. it might be about driving high performance. It's more about thinking about the outcome that you're trying to deliver to the business and creating both teams that have got both fixed and flex resource in there to be able to flip and prioritize the work that's needed in order to deliver those outcomes for the business. Alice, do you want to?
So the other key element in our new model is workforce transformation. We obviously know that there's core capabilities that HR must deliver, but we know there is also additional capability that is needed to support business transformation, and they need to be flexible and agile to move where it makes sense, where we're seeing business demand for it. So these are capabilities such as OD, change, continuous improvement, human-centric design, and they will be allocated to key business priorities that is determined within the Insights and Intelligence Hub.
Love it. So let's talk a little bit around that next ring, because I think this is a really important one, because this is now getting back to speaking the language of the rest of the business when we talk about that commercial relationship management. So Kat, can you just give us a little bit of an overview of that?
Yeah, definitely. And this is probably the one we've had the biggest debate about in terms of, is it really any different from a strategic business partner today? And I think the reality is it's not that different, but most organisations still really struggle to lift out that partnering role to be truly strategic. And what we've actually found in the conversations as we've been exploring this with clients is there really is a need to spin more of a commercial mindset into this particular capability in this role. It's not just about being strategic for the business, but it's about understanding the implications that the people agenda has on the commercial success of a business. And therefore, it does require a slightly different mindset. And it does also require the need to be able to interpret and leverage data in a far more effective way than often we provide our teams today. And being able to provide them views of, this is a particular challenge that may come out. We've seen the data, it indicates this is happening. There are market forces at play. What do we need to do as a business to tackle those, and being far more proactive and going to the business with the problem and the solution, and not just being the recipient of a problem. So Alice, I don't know if there's anything else to add to that, but I think this is the one where it's more about mindset than it is about the role truly changing.
Yeah, agree. I do think it's around the capability and skill set needed for this type of role is different to what you would typically see today. I could see a kind of a future where we take commercial managers out of the business to fulfill a role like this, who are able to really connect the tissue, but also have that mindset in understanding commerciality across the business.
Yeah, do you know what's really interesting? This is a good link and segue to the pod that we did around the HR disruptors, because in that we talked quite a lot around the changing mindset needed from some of these HR disruptors that are coming out. That's linked to the campaign as well as one of the pieces of content that we release. So you can either check that out just as a quick sort of Shakespearean aside before we get into the final piece, which is around people value orchestration, that I'm going to get Alice just to jump on and then Kat to build on. But if you want to check out the podcast, you can do so either through the campaign page itself, or you can do it via the insights page on the Lace Partners website. So you go to lacepartners.com/insights. But this final sort of ring, people value orchestration. It sounds very fancy. Can you explain to a simpleton like me what we're talking about here?
So people value orchestration is essentially a kind of unified HR leadership team who will oversee the entire ecosystem. So they will be making value-driven decisions to ensure every change in investment is aligned with a shared business value frame. So they, I guess, are the leaders and the most senior of the model, and they are ensuring that the model is delivering to the business need. Love it.
Kat, any kind of thoughts or additional builds on it?
Not to that specifically, but I think one of the things that I did want to talk about connected to the whole piece was why we've called it an ecosystem and not an operating model. Because I think what we're trying to bring across with that and articulate is that there are now even more considerations and components of this future ecosystem than we would have traditionally considered as part of a broader operating model. And so how AI plays a role in this whole thing end to end, not just in that overall delivery capability, but as teammates embedded within the ecosystem, playing roles alongside HR professionals, is quite different, and a different kind of way of thinking and a different way of organising the function than we have ever been used to before. And so that was why we really like to use the word ecosystem, because it just feels a little bit interconnected and interwoven, as opposed to just a model that is very siloed and structured. We use the words interchangeably, but I just thought it was useful to share where our heads were at really when we came up with that.
Yeah, and can we stick on that? Because we're just coming towards the end of time today, just for our quick check-in on that, because I wanted to do a little bit of if someone's listening into this, there's a lot of different bits that we've talked about, and it feels like you could fall into the trap if you're listening to this of thinking, this is very complex. It is complex, but where do I even start? But perhaps you can give me some thoughts around somebody listening in. If there's one thing that you do or take from this, apart from keep coming back to our website, because we'll drill down into some of these and we'll simplify it and we'll expand on some of these elements. What's the sort of initial takeaway you want to leave somebody with? And then Alice, I'll get you to do the same.
I think the first thing is probably just to take a step back and make sure you really understand the direction of travel for your business and really understand what the future looks like, the considerations there for HR. And our model isn't one size fits all. It doesn't suggest that this is right for everybody, but it's intended to provoke some thought around the potential of doing things quite differently. And so I think that I would just start there and understand where the business is going.
Yeah, I really like that. And that's a really good point, because one of the things that you guys have talked about with me as well, which I think we want to do, is we want to talk to other people who have got their other perspectives on different types of models. Because as we've said, this is our kind of view, but there isn't a one size fits all. Business is different, the size, the complexity of businesses, their needs, their drivers, a lot of that is going to impact it. But Alice, your final takeaway then, just before we wrap up today.
I think just on how to start, and we do go into a bit of a deep dive into this in the campaign, but I would suggest that just getting the core experience right first is a good way to start. So start by fixing one employee experience, like end to end. And this might be different depending on where the business is at, their op model maturity, like you said, Chris, workforce complexity, and what their kind of business driver is. I think if you're a business who is just starting to look at their HR operating model, I think get the foundations in first, and then it will make your life a lot easier when you start to look at things like an intelligence layer over the model.
So if you are interested, if you want to chat to the team, obviously we are more than happy to break down some of the individual parts. We'll be doing that through our campaign as it is. That campaign will be running certainly for the first half of 2026. But as the ladies have alluded to, because of the complexities, sometimes you need to drill down into these a little bit more in detail. But Kat, thank you very much, as always.
Thanks for having me.
Alice, always a pleasure, never a chore.
Thanks, Chris.
If you've enjoyed this podcast as much as we have enjoyed recording it, please feel free to drop a note to either Alice, myself, or Kat. If there's anything that's resonated with you that you think you'd like to drill down in a little bit more detail to, and at the time of listening in, we haven't quite done that deep drill down, then please, again, feel free, because the team have done a lot of work on this, and we'd be happy to chat. But from myself, from Kat, and from Alice, thank you very much for listening, and we'll catch you next time on the People Agenda podcast. Bye-bye.